I'm Don Pitzer, a professor emeritus of history from the University of Southern Indiana, where I founded and directed a Center for Communal Studies. And a couple of years ago, Dr. Rahima Schwenkbeck came to do research in those archives that we set up. And today it's my privilege to record an interview with her for the center website about the important book she has now published. And the book is on three major communal societies of the 1960s and 70s. Rahima, why don't you introduce yourself and then let me ask you some questions and we'll discuss.
Sure, that sounds great. My name is Rahima Schwenkbeck. I had the privilege of studying American Studies, and I did the bulk of my research at the Center for Communal Studies. I was so grateful to earn research grants there, and among other wonderful archival items they also obviously have your personal archives of all the hundreds of communes you visited over the years. Just an incredible resource. And yes, as a result of all the various archives and the research, I was able to put together my book, which is called I'm so sorry. It's very long. I originally titled it, thank you, The Business of Marketing, Entrepreneurship, and Architecture Communal Societies in the 1960s and 70s. I won't lie, my original working title was Doing Business in Utopia, but unfortunately, the publisher decided against it because they said it didn't have enough keywords. So I'm so sorry, I totally spaced on the name.
Well, it's a beautiful book. It was published by Palgrave Macmillan and in 2021. So I'm just so glad that we have a chance to discuss this very important book. Let me say by way of introduction, we all know that every social and political institution must have solid financial foundations to survive. And survival and ideological ideological convictions have often brought people together to live in communal societies in which they share their economic resources and production. A major importance of Rahima's book is its revealing of these often little known or understood yet vital financial underpinnings. As a historian of American business, her research explains the internal economic workings of three idealistic communal groups of the 60s and 70s and beyond. These are Soul City in North Carolina, created as a predominantly African American community on the initiative of the director of the Congress of Racial Equality, Floyd McKissick, in 1969, the Stelle community in Illinois from 1963, I should say, to the present, and Twin Oaks in Virginia from 1967 to today, that also hold racial integration as an essential ideal and practice. So you have looked deeply into these communities, and your study is really, really very revealing. Why did you select these three particular groups?
Oh, that's a great question. So as I briefly mentioned earlier, I was so fortunate to have won a research grant at the Center for Communal Studies. So while I was there, I spoke with Jennifer Green, who is a research archivist there, which is, anytime you go to archive, it's so crucial and so helpful to speak to the archivists there because they know the collection so intimately and they can give you a lot of, great insight. So I spoke with Jen, and I explained that I was interested in the financial underpinnings of various communities. And she gave me so many, not just these three, but many other communities as well, including Shiloh Farms. There's incredible research there, or archives there at at the center as well. I was also considering Alpha Farms, but the reason I ended up choosing Twin Oaks seems a little bit obvious only because there's just so much available information on them, not only at the Center for Communal Studies, but also at University of Virginia has a special collections. They've donated a great deal of their research there. And then also I was living in Washington, DC at the time, and I was doing my PhD there. So just proximity wise, I worked well to do Twin Oaks. Twin Oaks because their experiment, they wanted so many people to replicate it. They were they saved all of the information they had as much as possible. So getting financial records on them was very easy for the most part, and you know, that helped. That obviously helped. Soul City.
Let me ask you what particular practices, financial practices and patterns and plans or projects did you find that help these communities sustain themselves? I have visited Stelle and Twin Oaks, and they lasted longer in a communal form than Soul City. But what did all of them do to have financial underpinnings?
Sure. So Twin Oaks and Stelle and Soul City, so the three communities, they had very different approaches somewhat to their financial, how they plan to run. So I guess I'll just go with Twin Oaks at first. So Twin Oaks, as you know, they were one of the Walden 2 communities, and Walden 2, for people who aren't familiar with that book, is a book by B.F. Skinner, who's a psychologist, and he wrote a fictional story about an idealized community. And this community, he really focused on behavioralism in the community, but he wrote nothing of the financial underpinnings. But because of the psychological component to the community, many academic people were very interested in starting a Walden 2 community and trying to see how this would go. So those people originally thought they would go fund the community through mostly grants. However, Twin Oaks was founded by a group of breakaway participants who felt they were very concerned about grants because it was external funding and that could be removed at any moment. You might not get it. You can invest a lot of time in, seeking out grants and writing proposals, things like this. So this breakaway group created Twin Oaks, and then in order to fund themselves, they really focused on a wide variety of businesses. Twin Oaks, the property was chosen because it's in a rural area. They thought, well, not only would this rural area kind of give them a sort of feeling of an isolated utopia, it would also allow them to do farming. Originally, the first business Twin Oaks planned and tried was tobacco farming, but I think they were earning something like 10 cents per hour. It's just a very messy business. It's not obviously profitable whatsoever. So they tried all kinds of other very interesting businesses. They tried meal farming. They grew watermelons. They tried to make Christmas ornaments, stationery. One of the founding members started a hammock making business, and that eventually would take off and then, allow the community to make.
That's what they were doing when I visited.
Yes, exactly. They ended up taking 15%. Last time I checked, this was like this in the 70s, they were already at 15% of the market share. They're a market dominant in the business, became a multi-million dollar business. So because of that, they it was interesting for them to study them, because we see a lot of times people think of communal societies like struggling and hand to mouth, but it was interesting for them. They were struggling with too much success. They were actually able to funnel their business contracts out to other sister communities and things like this. They were actually turning away contracts. They were working with REI, LL Bean, Pier 1, things like this. So that was really interesting to see a community do that. Currently, they still have the hammock business, and they actually also started Twin Oaks Community Foods, and they make an excellent tofu as well. But again, they're again struggling with this issue of having too much success, where people love their products so much that they turn away business. So for them, anyways, long story short, they've been able to be financially successful because they focus solely on internal funding. To switch gears, looking at Stelle also had a very similar focus. Both Stelle and Twin Oaks had members help build the communities. They also had members create internal businesses. Stelle is interesting though, because unlike Twin Oaks, who had a lot of cottage industries, like, oh, we're going to make jewelry, we're going to make Christmas ornaments, things like that. Stelle focused on heavy industrial manufacturing. So they actually had metal fabrication plant, they had plastics manufacturing, later they did heavy woodworking and things like this. Those are the main three businesses that Stelle did. So they were doing quite well. Yeah.
There, yes. And then briefly, let's look at Soul City.
Sure. So Soul City, by contrast, they focus on external funding. Floyd McKissick, he was a founder of Soul City, and he was inspired to start the community after his service in World War II. He saw how the US was giving a lot of funding to European nations to help them rebuild through the Marshall Plan after World War II had devastated so many communities. He thought, well, you know, the United States, especially in Black communities, is being heavy hit by poverty and other, you know, neglect, things like this, and just the city centers need to be upgraded. So why not apply for, create some sort of Marshall Plan for communities within the United States. So he began Soul City. Initially, he was planning it to be a Black utopia, but once he received federal funding, it had to become a multiracial utopia. So it shifted the focus there. But the problem is, because he was awarded many grants, but if you look at the larger program in which he received the grants, the New Communities program, his community, despite being the only freestanding community, which is that he had to create a community literally in an undeveloped rural area. There was no transportation networks, there was no electricity, there was no waterways. He was given the least budget, whereas in contrast, other communities within that program were just creating like suburbs, or just even working within the community itself, like Minneapolis, for example. That was already a bustling city. They didn't need to create the infrastructure. So Floyd McKissick was already up against insurmountable odds, and then there's a lot of issues with racism as well. Jesse Helms was constantly requesting that the Soul City project be audited. I will say, having been through the financial records, there is some financial misdeeds going on as well. So it's some of the auditing was not unwarranted, but some of it was there was definitely some issues going on there. But
let me hold your book up again and let everybody see the title. You've explained the underpinnings financially, which very few people have gotten into at that deep level in the study of other communities. So I celebrate you for doing that. The book also tells the long-range achievements of these communal groups and what we can learn from them. And so I really urge people to take advantage of Rahima's book. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.